My third year of college, I moved off campus and into a student apartment building. The university arranged for me to have a roommate, someone who also needed someone to live with. His name was David, and at first he seemed like a nice guy, friendly and polite, always smiling and chatting politely. But as we lived together, I began to notice strange things about him, habits and behaviors that made me feel uncomfortable. David would often hang around my room, asking personal questions and rummaging through my things too freely. At first I thought it was just harmless curiosity, even though it was a bit odd. But the more I thought about it, the more it bothered me. Then at night, I began to hear noises coming from David's room. The voices and the clutter made me nervous. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that David was probably watching TV or talking on the phone. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. One night, unable to sleep because of strange noises coming from David's room, I decided to investigate. I crept down the hall and pressed my ear to David's door, trying to hear what was going on inside. I heard David whispering to himself, his voice low and barely audible. Then suddenly the whispering stopped and there was silence. Then I heard David call my name. Jeff! Did David know I was outside his door? I quickly and quietly walked back to my room, crawled into bed, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. Why was David talking to himself? Was he hiding something? But if he was sleepwalking, how did he know I was outside the door? The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about the night before. As the noises from David's room continued and my anxiety grew worse, I felt like he was hiding something. David's behavior also became more strange. I began to notice small changes in the way he acted, like peeking at me and moving around furtively. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night and heard David whispering from the hallway, right outside my door. This really scared me, and I wondered if he was sleepwalking. I put my ear to the door, and like before, the whispering stopped. Then David called my name again. This time I answered, "Yeah, are you okay?" He didn't respond, only the sound of his footsteps returning to his room. The next night, I woke up to the sound of my door closing. I heard David's footsteps walking out into the hallway. This had gotten out of hand. The next morning, I decided to confront David about the possibility of him sleepwalking. I told him that I had heard him walking around late at night and that I had heard him close my door last night. I asked him if he ever sleepwalked or had trouble sleeping. At first, he seemed unsure of how to answer, but then he said that he sometimes sleepwalked. I didn't believe it. I decided to find out what was so mysterious about David's room. I knew it was a risk, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I waited until David left the apartment, then snuck into his room. I did a quick search, rummaging through drawers and closets for anything that could explain David's strange behavior. And then, just as I was about to give up, I found a small, inconspicuous drawer at the back of David's closet. I opened it and my blood ran cold when I saw what was inside. It was a collection of photos, dozens of them, mostly of me sleeping, and another person who looked about the same age. The photos were taken from different angles and distances, some so close that I could see the pores on my skin and individual hairs on my head. I felt sick to my stomach when I realized that David had been secretly taking photos of me while I slept without my consent. I couldn't believe that I had been living with such a pervert. He had invaded my privacy and my personal space for who knows how long. I wanted to confront David for answers, but I was afraid of what he might do, afraid of what he would say, afraid of what would happen if I confronted him alone. So I took a photo of the drawer and took some of the photos as evidence. I packed my things, and the next morning, I took the photos to the student housing department. They told me to let them handle it and quickly arranged for me to have another apartment with a regular roommate. I never spoke to David again. Even now, years later, I can't forget those horrifying photos and David's whispering at night. I never found out who the other person in the photos was, probably David's old roommate, but I never found out his name. Maybe that person also discovered the creepy truth. After a big fight with my parents, I had to move out and find a new place to live. I had been living on friends' couches for a while, but I knew that wouldn't last. I started looking on apps and websites for apartments and roommates. On one app, I found a room for rent from a man named Luke. It was a one-story house with 3 bedrooms, and the rent was $200 a month. Luke would be my landlord and roommate since he also lived in the house. In the ad, he emphasized that he would be out a lot and that the tenant would have the house to themselves. However, he also emphasized a few rules like no parties, no large gatherings, no drinking in the living room, and no basement. Those rules seemed pretty standard. I went to see the house and met Luke. As soon as he opened the door, I got the feeling that he was a closed person. He seemed quiet and a little strange. As he showed me around the house, I noticed that his voice was shaky and stuttering, indicating that he was very nervous. The bedroom was a decent size and the whole layout of the house was very good, with an open space for the kitchen, living room, and dining room. The rent of $200 per month in my area was a bargain. Luke insisted on the no attic or basement rules since he was only using them for storage. That sounded fair. I decided to rent the room on the spot. We shook hands and I moved in 2 days later. We didn't draw up any contract, I just paid him monthly, off the books. I quickly settled in. The bedroom was furnished with a bed and basic furniture, so I just hung some decorations and arranged my clothes in the closet. The bedroom had a lock and Luke gave me a key, allowing me to lock the room when he wasn't home, which seemed like a nice gesture at first. However, I quickly realized that Luke didn't go out as much as he said. Whenever I came home, his car was always in the driveway. The first few nights, I started hearing strange noises outside the bedroom, from footsteps to doors opening and closing repeatedly. One night, I went out in the middle of the night to use the bathroom and noticed the basement door was open. I walked to the top of the stairs and looked down. There was a dim light in the far corner that I couldn't see. I heard banging coming from there, and it was 2 a.m. Luke appeared at the bottom of the stairs and looked up at me. He looked annoyed and asked me to close the basement door. A week later, I came home and found my bedroom door open. I always locked it before going out every day. Looking around the room, I found nothing missing but noticed that the clothes in the drawers were not neat and the closet door was open. It was obvious that Luke had come into the room and rummaged through my things. I felt this was a serious invasion of privacy and decided to confront him. However, when I knocked on his door, no one answered. His car was still there, but he did not appear. I felt extremely strange. That night, while I was watching TV in my room, I heard Luke's door open. I decided to take this opportunity to confront him, but when I got to the living room, I saw him rushing out of the house. I asked him if he had come into my room, and he answered frankly no. I continued to ask why my door was open, and he insisted that I was the only one with the key. He then said that he was in a hurry and left. After he left, I decided to check the basement. I opened the basement door and used my phone flashlight to light my way. The basement was very small with an old sofa in the middle of the room and a foul smell coming from a door in the corner. The door was locked and I couldn't open it. I quickly left the basement and went back to my room. I woke up in the dark, not because of the alarm clock, but because of a noise next to my bed. I turned around and saw Luke standing next to my bed looking at me. I yelled, he asked me to be quiet and asked if I had been in the basement. I said no and asked how he got into my room when I had locked the door. He raised his hand but had nothing in it, then said I should find another place to stay and leave. I started packing my things immediately and decided to leave the house. I knocked on his door and asked for half the rent back. He gave me $400. I left the house immediately and slept in my car that night. The next day I went back to my parents' house, and after telling them everything, they accepted me back. I moved out a month later, but my relationship with my parents was good again. If you decide to pick a random roommate from the internet, be careful and use your best judgment after meeting them.